What's up guys, it's time for the Mexican Grand Prix this weekend of course, and so I thought I'd take a look at the circuit and what's involved in setting up and preparing for that circuit, what the challenges are from the teams and drivers' perspectives. We're going to talk about altitude of course, as everybody has to when they talk about the Mexican City Grand Prix, but let's talk first about things like tyres, because this year Pirelli are bringing tyres, it's the middle three from the drive range, so the C2, C3, C4, but they are effectively a step harder than last year. If you think back to last year's race, it was heavily affected by tyre deg, because the tyres were particularly soft that they brought last year, and it meant that drivers were having to really manage pace, I mean to extreme levels where it made the race incredibly dull at times, and we've seen that in a number of places, haven't we? So Pirelli have decided this time around to go one step harder because they realise that teams will always try and favour a one stop wherever possible. So if they're going to do that anyway, let's give them a tyre that they can push on throughout that stint rather than having to slow down and manage the pace, which can create something really unwatchable. So I think a sensible move from Pirelli. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The circuit itself, I guess, it's not actually a particularly abrasive circuit. It is bumpy. It's an old school track, of course. It's bumpy, which affects the way you have to set the car up. We'll get onto that in a moment. But from a tyre perspective, probably not too tough on tyres. There are some tough sections, and it is possible to overheat them because, of course, like everything else, and again, we'll get onto the altitude in a moment, like everything else, they are less cooled by the thinner air. So it is possible to overheat tyres, and you do have to manage that to some extent, but generally not one of the toughest races for tyres around here. What else? Aero Levels, of course. Aero Levels are at their maximum level, so they are Monaco level aero packages on each car, yet they get the downforce level of something like Monza, maybe even less than Monza because of the thin air. So we'll expect to see big wings, lots of changes since the last Grand Prix in terms of what aero package is on the car, but in terms of grip levels, it's a circuit that's really difficult because there's no downforce pushing you into the tarmac. It's difficult to control tyre temperatures. People like Haas, who are already really struggle with tyre temperatures, are probably going to really struggle here. You really struggle to generate enough tyre temperature, and what you can have is, because the car starts to slide as you begin to push, you can really introduce graining into the whole concept as well. So quite a difficult one to manage from a team's perspective, even though the tyres might not be going through the hardest time ever. What else? It's a very fast circuit in places, so it has some really long straights. We've got a third DRS zone this year as well. So there should be overtaking opportunities, however they will typically be DRS assisted, which I know is not the best way we love to see overtaking happening, but it's a circuit that actually doesn't have, other than those DRS assisted opportunities, too many places where you can really get by. Let's see, suspension wise, because it's bumpy, we need to account for the bumps, so we need to have a decent amount of damping in the car to account for bumps so it doesn't unsettle it too much, but there are some sections where we really need to control the roll and the pitch of the car. So actually a stiffer setup in terms of roll stiffness is often preferred here, because there are some sections, which you'll see when I do a lap in a moment, where you're really flinging the car from one direction to the other, and if the car rolls too much, it just tips the weight over to one side, really loads up the outside tyres and can break traction, and you can disappear off. So it's about trying to maintain a stable platform as solid as you can, but still being able to manage the bump. So that's probably one of the challenges from a team's perspective when they go into Friday setting the car up, evaluating their aero package and of course the mechanical setup in terms of riding bumps and controlling roll. Right, let's talk about the altitude, because as I say, you can't talk about this place without talking about it. It's over 2 kilometres high, 1.4 miles up above sea level, which is extraordinary. When you go there, you notice it. I mean, I'm a fairly fit type of guy. I mean, I do a lot of running, but when I go there, you climb up a flight of stairs and it's like you've just done a run. You're out of breath, you're really struggling. And so you can imagine from a driver's perspective, when they're under the forces and the stresses and strains in the car, that can become tough. They have to go there a little bit early and acclimatise, most of them. It's something they have to specifically train towards, the Mexican Grand Prix, and controlling that. Same for the pit crews, it's on a much lower level, but bursting out the garage, that's a short period of time, is a really high energy moment for those pit stops, and you can find yourself very quickly out of breath in those times. So there's not a huge amount you can do other than try to prepare, try to train. The teams will of course have been there a bit longer, so they'll have been there for nearly a week or at least a good few days now, so they will have acclimatised to some extent. But why is it then that the altitude has such a big impact on aerodynamics and on cooling? Well, I've got the clipboard, the drawing board out again, so we're going to have a little look. Okay, two more of my special delightful drawings of racing cars going along a racetrack. We'll call this one down here Mexico, and this one, let's call that a normal track. So the car's travelling in this direction, of course. Now what I want to just show you in very crude fashion, obviously, because it's me, let's say the car's travelling through here. Let's take a box, a section of the air that it's about to pass through. Now what happens here is that that section of air, let's just say for example it was a metre cubed of air for argument's sake, that box or that volume of air in a normal racetrack contains, you know, obviously millions and millions and millions and millions of molecules of air. Now obviously this drawing is not to scale but what happens is all of these millions and billions and trillions, and I don't know how many it actually is, but these molecules of air, because there are so many, they all impact the way the car travels through it. Because there's so many, that air is called, it's dense air, it's normal air. As the car travels through it has to pass through this lot. So first of all, there's all these air molecules here that will start to push down as it goes over the aerodynamic surfaces onto the car, pushing it into the surface of the racetrack, creating downforce. The other thing, of course, it does is it creates drag, because the car has to push its way through all of these big molecules of air. In the same way, the same molecules of air have to travel in through things like brake ducts in here to be able to then cool the air that comes out the brakes. Now that airflow there with all of these molecules of air, each one of those molecules of air takes away a portion of heat from the brakes as it travels over it and then passes out. So because there's so much air, it can take away quite a lot of heat. Now in Mexico what happens, and this is obviously in hugely exaggerated form, we have far less molecules of air for the same given amount or volume of space. Now the fewer air molecules have the opposite effect, so there are much fewer of them to push down onto the car, so we only get a tiny amount of downforce for the same amount of aero surfaces. We get much less drag, because for the same reason there's less air molecules that the car has to push its way through and slow it down. But also of course we get far less cooling impact, because there's only a few air molecules in that given space to be able to take heat away from the brakes and the power unit and all of the other elements of the car that need cooling. And it's a big element, it's a big part of it, it's a big problem. Formula One cars operate at an optimum temperature with everything, whether that's power units, you know, the radiators, the batteries, the electronics, the internal combustion engine itself. They all have operating temperatures that they have to operate within, otherwise they start failing or they don't operate at maximum performance level. The brakes are exactly the same. And the same with tyres. Tyres have to, as we all know, have to be in the right operating window, otherwise they just don't work. They don't give the grip between the car and the racetrack surface. So this air thing, this thinner air, less dense air at that altitude, definitely has a huge impact. It's not something we just talk about for effect because it's so high up there. It has a massive, massive impact. I mean, just simply the fact that we're running Monaco levels of downforce or Monaco levels of wing and aero package, but getting, you know, a fraction of the downforce that we would have got at Monaco tells you exactly what sort of effect it's having. So it's a really interesting phenomenon, and I like it. You know, I'm not one of these people that subscribes to the fact that we shouldn't have weird races on the calendar like Monaco or Singapore because perhaps they don't give the best racing. I'm actually much more for having a calendar that's full of unique races, and for me this is one of those unique races. It doesn't always give the best racing. Sometimes it has, but it doesn't always. But it poses a unique set of challenges for the teams and for the drivers, and for that reason I think it absolutely deserves its place. Right, that's hopefully given some sort of explanation, even if the drawing is terrible. And speaking of terrible things, should we go and have a watch of me doing a terrible lap on the Xbox around this circuit? Right, let's go for a lap. Okay, the final corner is crucial because it leads us on to what is an incredibly long and fast start-finish straight. DRS opens underneath the start light gantry, and then we go on and on. Drivers have time to make switch position changes on the steering wheel, tear off visor strips, and then I want to stop it here. Look at this, we're at maximum speed having come down this incredibly long straight, and just look how wide the braking zone is into turn 1. Massive overtaking opportunity, but if you lunge one down the inside, just look where that green racing line strip goes on the screen there. Stays well over to the right hand side. What the car wants to do at those speeds is drift over to the left to get maximum exit speed, and that's where you want to go if you've made a big lunge and late on the brakes down the inside into turn 1. We've got to get the car all the way back over to the right hand side for this very quick quick approaching left-hander and then a right-hander, quite tight. Able to use the curbs here, but not too much here on the exit, because then we've got to get the power down. No wheel spin because we're into a second DRS zone and another straight. And on we go then, and then another very similar section to the first part. Big on the brakes, 3 corners in quick succession again. Clipping curbs, but not too much. It tightens up on the exit really a lot. And then we're down towards the grandstand. Jumping on the brakes again, not too important to clip the apexes here, because it's much more about keeping the minimum speed up as high as possible. And then this little sprint down to perhaps the best section. I'm going to stop it. I really want to keep going flat through here, but I'm going to stop it. This section here reminds me of the S's in Japan. It's where a Formula 1 car really comes alive, and it's just flowing from one to the other. There's a dab on the brakes into the first one, but then it's flat. Possibly a little lift with some cars through here, but just flowing, keeping the speed as high as possible. The car just switching from one side to the other. Really, we want as stiff a suspension as we can to minimise the amount of weight transfer from one side to the other. We don't want to lean too much on the tyres and put too much stress on them. But just look how it goes straight from one side to the other. Get inside the groove and you will fly through here. Put 1 foot wrong and you'll be disappearing off over those runoff areas and towards the barriers. Now this is another third DRS zone for this year, new, introduced. It's not really long enough to become an overtaking opportunity, but what it will do is allow the cars to close up a little bit with each other before they enter this stadium section. The old circuit used to go straight on down there, but nowadays we turn right into what was an old baseball stadium, and the atmosphere inside here, I can tell you, is just fantastic. Even when you're in the pit lane, you can hear every time Sergio Perez comes into this section, because the crowd just go wild. It's really slow and twisty, not really much of an overtaking opportunity through this little chicane, but the crowd get a great view, and if the cars are closed up due to that third DRS zone, they'll be in for an absolute treat. And then we come through the final corner, turn 16 and then turn 17, as I said, critical to get the power down as quickly and as smoothly as possible, because then we go back onto this start-finish straight. And look, because I had a poor exit, look already how my speed, how I'm losing time all the way down it. Let's go again. Right, well there you go. Perhaps not the best set of laps, but I hope it gives a bit more insight into what the circuit's actually like. Now, as ever, with these videos, the GP Box have very kindly sent me a prize that I can give away to one of you. And this week it comes from one of their suppliers, Kieran Roberts, an artist that, if you've been with me for a while, you'll have seen some of his stuff before, because I've given some stuff away earlier in the season. This week, it's perhaps one for the old schoolers. Check this out. Look at that. So that is a really, really lovely piece of work. It actually, I promise you, it looks even better in the flesh than it does through a camera lens. The name of the artwork is Champagne Showdown. It's the epic battle between Gilles Villeneuve in the Ferrari 312 T4 and René Arnoux in the Renault RS11 during the final laps of the 1979 French Grand Prix at Dijon. Apparently. But it looks awesome, and it could be yours. And all you have to do this week, I'm going to pop this picture of this artwork onto Instagram, but I'm also going to create a link from that to Twitter. So if you follow me on Instagram, then you'll see this post. If you follow me on Twitter, you should also see this post, and all you got to do is reply to either the Instagram post or the Twitter post telling me what it is you like about the picture and why you'd like it. So that's all you got to do. Send me a tweet or an Instagram post in reply to the post that I put up. You must use the hashtag GPBMEX, and that way I'll make sure that I can't miss it. And that's all you got to do. From that, on Monday, in Monday's Q&A video, I will pick out a winner at random from either Twitter or Instagram, whichever one you reply to, and that's it. It'll be heading your way. So good luck with that. I hope you enjoy the Mexican Grand Prix weekend. Don't forget, any questions that pop up over the weekend, or even right now, if you want a question answered in Monday's Ask Elvis video, all you got to do is send it to me wherever you want, but just use the hashtag Ask Elvis for that one. But that's on Monday. For now though, it's hashtag GPBMEX if you want to win this picture. See you later.